Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of the latest episode of What We Do in the Shadows, The Campaign. And let me just apologize, it is thunderstorming outside, so if you hear that and everything, I apologize. But, on to the review. So, this episode was okay. The main bulk of the story is mainly carried by Colin Robinson and his thing with the titular campaign for comptroller. And then we get another story with Nadja hanging out with the Antipaxos family and Laszlo being Laszlo and Nandor trying to get another friend. So it kind of goes in that order, and that the Nandor friend one gets the least amount of time. So let's actually dive into that one. He's just been tooling around the gym, and he hasn't really been hanging out with Guillermo because Guillermo's been like dodging him, and we see the kind of dodging kind of going on. And he spots this one dude named Alexander, and we find out he's Jewish, and he then just starts going around the house pretty much saying Jewish phrases and stuff and be like, I got a new friend, and then goes to the movies with the dude, and Alexander's like, yeah, he just wanted to hang out, so I was like, what could be the harm, as Nandor's got a fuck ton of popcorn and talks like an asshole during the movie while Alexander's trying to get him to be quiet. And then he also enlists Guillermo at a certain point to circumcise him to get closer to his friend. And he does, and then he tries to surprise him in the bathroom. Be like, hey, look, I'm circumcised, but of course he's a vampire and it fucking healed. And the dude's like, get the fuck away from me. And that's about it. Like, I could have understood if they, like, put more kind of work into this setup and premise that it could have worked, but we're just amped up that Nandor's lonely, Nandor's an asshole, and just kind of running with it. And I do like that he's trying to like figure out and interact with humans, but it's just so smallly done and just been like kind of just plopped in because they're like, okay, we need 3 stories, let's do this. It doesn't even get to the heights of the previous episode where they somehow dovetailed everything together to work. It doesn't work on that front. Then let's go with Nadja's, where she's just hanging out with these humans. And again, not enough emphasis and focus is put on like her human kind of interactions. She makes a salad with like fucking sticks and creamer and coffee on it and hands it to someone at some point. It's like, alright. And she's trying to introduce Laszlo, and he thinks that they're lowborn and everything like that, and trying to dress like them and talk like them. And he's in this weird ass getup. And he then tries to sing a song, but it's the song of a neighboring island that's like their mortal enemy, and it pisses him off. And then he comes in pretty much just spouting like, I'm a dude born from a manor, I can speak all these languages as long as they're English, and all this kind of stuff. And then the Antipaxos people just love him because he's like an idiot, and he's supposed to be this kind of spirit of good luck and whatnot, and they just kind of hang out with him. And it's like, Nadja kind of like explains that kind of thing, and that's kind of it. And it's not completely horrible, but it doesn't reach the heights of what they've done and what they can do and execute and write beforehand. And it's just like, alright, it's not the worst thing that I've seen or kind of like been put through, but it was kind of boring. And I'm just like, alright, I kind of get this. And this then affects the Colin Robinson one, where again, we've got these things that have potential, but because they're kind of slammed together, we can't get them to their full potential, because they're having to try and balance all these kind of things. And if they had developed an episode or whatnot, they used to be able to really do this pretty well, where they develop an episode and the A line, B line, maybe even a C line just interweave together so seamlessly that you don't feel that there's wasted potential. Here, it's not so much. Like the Colin Robinson bit should have taken precedence and just been the whole thing, and you work in Nandor, Guillermo, Laszlo, and Nadja, as we figure out that Sean was running for comptroller, but he had to drop out because he had 9 DUIs, and the most that many people do when they run is like 2 or 3. So then Colin Robinson's like, hey, I'll take over and try to be comptroller, but he's only doing it for feeding. And then we see him go back to the Evie chick, which we had seen previously, the emotional energy vampire, and they do all this kind of stuff, kind of get back together. He gives her like a Titanic stuff. He's doing all these movie kind of quotes. She's in like this breakup support kind of group, and he enlists her into this, and he's like, oh yeah, a debate is a perfect place for an energy vampire, and that a lot of politicians are energy vampires because of like the unique opportunities that present themselves. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. If we gotten a full episode or even like a kind of arc on this, that would work pretty well. But the thing is, we get to it and we see him in this debate, and it's like 5 hours, and we just see the kind of what they believe are kind of the funny bits. Like, you could really structure Colin Robinson doing crazy, stupid shit, because we get to the point, and his opponent pretty much wants to digitize and make the bureaucracy more efficient. And we see that Colin and Evie are pretty much milking up the group and crowd and pretty much getting the energy out of them and all that. And the thing is, we pretty much are shown the debate through 2 different perspectives. It actually working and happening in real time, and then pretty much a YouTube video where they kind of scan through with it. And I'm not opposed to that, but it's the execution of like, oh, okay, like, it could have been great where it used to do, where you would see kind of Colin go to like a hearing or whatnot, and it would shift between different kind of focuses. I mean, shit, when Colin and Laszlo went into that kind of courtroom thing, that was pretty kind of funny. If they'd followed a similar kind of executable format like that, this kind of would have worked pretty well, as you'd then see the timestamps of like somebody looking at their phone or whatnot, or like 3 hours later, 2 hours later. I would have been fine with that. But as they're leaving, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. They get taken by this group and driven off in a van. And then, of course, the crew follows, and the people are like, if you're waiting for something kind of crazy and violent to happen, that's not going to be this. And we see that Colin and Evie were brought forth for the Supreme Vampiric Energy, Supreme Council for the Energy Vampires, which was kind of cool. This was a really good kind of executed one, as we see them kind of like annoying and doing their own kind of energy vampirisms. This one lady with an annoying phone that she always has to check and everything like that. This one dude who's explaining how she should be able to get through the phone and doing all this kind of stuff. And we see it really affecting Colin and Evie, where Colin's like, oh, Jesus Christ. And it's like, can we kind of get to it? And they're brought here because the head of the council explains that Colin needs to beat this woman because bureaucracy is the main kind of way that energy vampires feed. This would be a detrimental effect on their food system. And this is kind of cool because it explains how, in certain instances, vampires have to engineer humans to work in certain kind of ways, so that way their food source, drawing energy and everything, works out pretty well. This is kind of cool. We're seeing the 2 worlds kind of interact and have drastic effects on each other. That's the kind of cool shit that this show should be doing and has done before. And it's just, and Colin's like, I don't even want to be comptroller. I just did a feeding kind of thing. It's like, no, you're going to do it. And they even forced him to go through this like presentation and shit of like 543 slides. And we don't see the whole thing, but they're like, all right, cool, we'll do it. And Colin's then trying to do the campaign to actually win it, and he's like, I can't do this shit anymore. I'm pulling my audible, and pretty much shows that he's like naked and says that he was beating off to all their faces and stuff during this like town hall Zoom kind of thing going on. And he pretty much gets kicked out, and Evie takes over and actually wins. It was like a low turnout, but because of the write-ins, Evie took over, and he's like, hey, can I see you again? And she's like, no, we're done. And of course, that's her kind of emotional energy vampire kind of way, but we still see that Colin is affected by this. Now, I don't mind retreading back to Eevee, but this just feels like a retread. It doesn't feel like growth or whatnot. We don't bring into the fact that Colin pretty much went through a resurrection process of dying and then being reborn. There's no Laszlo-isms. It's just a kind of same old thing that we did with Eevee, not in an office setting, but with a campaign setting where Colin then gets his heart broken again. And I understand that shows given a long enough timeline will then start to potentially repeat certain kind of beats and instances. Now, that's not to say you can't do those, but do something with it for some kind of growth, either with one character or another, or to show a kind of regression or some kind of movement on the character front of where they are versus what they've done and how they've kind of done it going forward. That's what I always hate with the will they won't they kind of shit, and what has been the central kind of weakness within the effect of Guillermo and Nandor's whole relationship of being familiar and vampire, and Tim just being like, I'll turn you eventually. No, I won't. I'll turn you eventually. No, I won't. And then why I really like the Guillermo at the end of last season is like, fuck this shit. I'm paying that dude to make me a vampire. And we still got this stuff like, I don't even know if they've brought up that potentially his vampire hunter blood could have done this thing to kind of bork him into this weird kind of crazy ass vampire kind of thing. And Nadja is just now focused on trying to break the curse of being an asshole by still being an asshole. Now granted, I understand we've got a journey with her to try and get there, but we're 4 episodes deep and there's supposed to be like 10 episodes. And hers is like the least interesting one at this point. Normally, they would be able to juggle this more effectively and have it to a point where she's either made some progress or made some regressions and acting kind of worse, and the curse would potentially be probably getting a little bit worse at that point, to be like, fuck you, asshole, to kind of maybe instigate more of a change. But we'll see, because she feels like she's in a holding pattern. Laszlo's the one that's having like the most kind of fun of just fucking off and doing kind of shit. So I'm always glad when Laszlo kind of pops up and does whatever he does. So we'll see kind of what happens. Hopefully better kind of content pops up and we go through and it kind of gels more as the season goes on. But these are the kind of problems and issues that I've had so far with this. I hope they get better integration of their different kind of storylines. Because Collins was the only one that I felt had value here, because it was like, oh, okay, like this, getting a little bit more into the energy vampires, connecting them to why there's bureaucracy, because energy vampires need to feed. Nandor's was like the most kind of throwaway kind of one. I'm just like, oh, okay, that's there. And Nadja's is just holding pattern until we get that resolved. We didn't even get the doll or the guide in this episode, which they don't need to be in every episode, but I kind of need something to make Nadja's a little bit more palpable, and granted Laszlo filled in that kind of role. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.